I'm Joanne Darcy and you're listening to High Performance Woman podcast, where we're elevating stories of high performance women from across the globe. Here's what we have coming up for you today.
It was like 12 years of a kind of an international career, be it Europeans, Worlds, and then kind of finally culminating in the Olympics. I didn't believe anymore. I kind of thought to myself, like, I'm never going to jump as high as I used to jump. Did I really appreciate it when I was there? Like, did I soak it all up? And like, I hope I did, but like looking back, you often think, God, maybe I could have made more of it. And I think sometimes you get to the top of a mountain and you see the top of another mountain, you're like, so every few centimetres I got better at, I kind of thought, well, like there's more there, because if I do this and I do that, then I'll get even better. I think one thing that I learned along the way was, trying to be a better version of yourself rather than trying to be somebody else. I was really clear when I, finished my athletics career that I need to be passionate about what I do and care about it, because I think that drives high performance. It's hard to be driven when you don't really believe in what you're doing.
Today's guest is hugely impressive Deirdre Ryan. Deirdre is the Director of Sustainability and Quality Assurance at Bord Bia, where she's responsible for driving and implementing the Origin Grain strategy. Her career has progressed through the years from management consultancy and finance into the food industry in the area of corporate social responsibility and sustainability in big brands such as Nestle, Ornua and Lidl, working across various international markets. As well as her vast corporate experience, Deirdre is an Irish Olympian representing Ireland in the high jump at the London 2012 Olympics. She holds 2 master's degrees, an MSc in Business Sustainability and an MBS in International Business, as well as a Bachelor degree in Commerce International with Italian from UCD. Deirdre has served as a member of the board of Sport Ireland since 2021. Deirdre, an absolute pleasure. I'm delighted to welcome you onto High Performance Podcast.
Thanks for having me on, and thanks for the introduction.
A huge amount of achievements there, Deirdre. So congratulations on all of them across education, sports, and your career. A huge amount of high performance. I'm just really curious as to who was the woman behind all of these achievements.
God, well, I'd have to say my mother, really. So I think from a very young age, my mum always encouraged me to, be my best, do my best, strive for high performance, and kind of, I suppose, instilled a growth mindset in me. And I think that's really, really stood to me. And I guess, my family really kind of instilled, I'd say, values in me around work ethic and resilience and everything else. So I'd have to say that was something from early days that like really, I suppose, formed my character and the way I approach things. There's been so many, other women along the way. I was fortunate to have a female coach from a very young age, and also Lucy Moore, and she was also a sports psychologist. So I think from a very early age, I kind of understood, without kind of delving into the psychology of everything, but the importance of setting goals, of visualization, of kind of road mapping, where you want to be and how you want to get there, and building resilience and things like that. So there's been so many formidable women in my journey, down to my last CEO, who was a female, Tara McCarthy, so I've had plenty of female role models in my life to kind of shape my direction.
So based on what you said there, like in terms of the nature versus nurture argument, obviously you display high performance in many areas of your life, and what you've described there is a lot of nurture. What's your view on nature versus nurture for high performance in individuals?
Gosh, that's a big question. I'd say first and foremost, we all have different temperaments and different mentalities. I don't think that, any one, type or child is predestined to be more high performance than the other. But I do think there's different ways of nurturing different characters and different people. And I think that's probably important when you're coaching a team, coaching, be it in work or in the sporting world or in any area. So I think one thing that I learned along the way was, trying to be a better version of yourself rather than trying to be somebody else. I spent so many years trying to be better at athletics and trying to be the best I could be. And I think I wasted an awful lot of time looking at, you know, okay, she won a medal, what does she do? Okay, I should act like her, and I should, like, you know, be all tough, and, you know, but, you know, maybe it doesn't work for you. So I do think you can't stray too far from your natural instinct, but you can kind of evolve and work with your strengths and, you know, maybe address some of your weaknesses. But, you know, there's no one size fits all in terms of doing well.
Yeah. In terms of your own journey as a child, what attracted you, or how did you get into athletics at the time? What did that look like for you?
For me, I think I was inspired by the likes of Sonia O'Sullivan, Katrina McKiernan. I, at a very young age, wanted to be a distance runner. I've no ability, no long distance, no endurance ability whatsoever. So it became very clear at a very early stage that I wasn't going to excel in that field. But I was inspired by those athletes, and I just wanted to go to the Olympics. I wanted to be an Olympian. And I wanted to join the local athletics club. I was too young at the time. I think I was like 6 and you had to be 8 to join the club. Something along those lines at the time. But yeah, then I eventually was allowed to join a year early because we kept knocking on the door. And I tried all sorts of events. I did tried a bit of everything, and found something I was better and good at and more adept at. So I think I really wanted to be good at something, and I found my niche, I suppose.
Yeah. In the high jump, so you mentioned running, so the distance running and the did you go from distance to try like sprinting, or did you move into more of the field events then and stick with kind of high jump from a young age?
Yeah, well, you know, in the club you kind of try everything, because you know, that's what kind of track and field works. You try all the events, and you do. Most kids, and that's the best way for young kids to develop, is to, you know, try all events, and you know, even be bad. You know, I think it's really important to fail and to be bad and to develop resilience. And that's why I think even if you're not good at something, it's good to do it, because it's okay to be last, and you deal with it. You come, you cry, and you learn, and you know, so even doing things you're bad at is good. So I did a bit of everything for a long time, and then tried high jump. And I guess I'm probably more explosive, good coordination and strength rather than endurance. So it became pretty clear. But I kept doing all for a while, and then specialised in high jump. Yeah.
I seen when I was researching your career and your athletics career that you were with DSD.
Yeah.
And then I said to myself, I must check in terms of your year of birth, because I actually was in athletics for Clonard Farriers.
Oh,
and
good.
My events were the high jump as well.
No way.
Now I was okay. I wasn't great. I preferred sprinting, but
that's gas. You probably competed against each other.
What I was
so
thinking.
I'm born in 1982.
Okay, yeah. So just probably you're maybe 1 or 2 age categories ahead. I was 84, and I was January 84. So for all kids that are born in January, as much as your birthday can seem a little bit depressing because it's straight after Christmas and nobody wants to celebrate with you, it's great for athletics because you get the year up on everybody. So, but yeah, I can relate to what you're saying. I think athletics for young kids is great, and you do get to try so much, and then you can fine tune into one area.
Yeah. And you know, like, it's great for just, you know, getting kids into sport for just socialising, learning to work in a team, you know, like, as I said, learning discipline. I think it's just really important when you're growing up, and, you know, you have to be there on a certain day, a certain time. And, you know, as we said earlier, like, my mom was like very, you know, she was very strong on people are giving up their time, so you need to be there every single time you're training. You know, you can't not go because other people are giving up their time, and be respectful, and, you know, they're all good lessons from, you know, a young age.
And what sort of commitment was it for you then to progress up into eventually representing Ireland in the Olympics, which is huge?
Yeah, it was kind of, do you know what? It was kind of a, it was kind of a winding journey, to be honest, you know. Like, I would say, I mean, so I was 30 by the time I made the Olympics, but my first maybe international competition, was when I was maybe in first year in university in UCD. So it was like 12 years of a kind of an international career, be it Europeans, Worlds, and then kind of finally culminating in the Olympics. But I missed a few Olympics along the way, be it through injury and everything else. So you know, it was kind of like my Olympics was at the end. I missed Beijing, and I probably wasn't good enough by the time Athens came around. So even from kind of college days, I would have been training quite hard. So it was my priority, you know, even in college. But I guess like there's not a huge history of high jumping in Ireland. At the time, there probably wasn't a big history of, you know, like my coach and I, we joke now, like we were just trying to figure out weightlifting. Like, you know, I just didn't know. We like just reading a book in like how to strength training in college. And I used to go into college. I used to go in every single day. I didn't realize you had to take break days. So I'd go in before college 5 days a week and lift weights every single day and do the same exercises and just do mad stuff.
Yeah.
So it took us a while to kind of figure out like how it should work. You know, you didn't really have the kind of, you couldn't really see what everyone else was doing in their training and everything else. So like I would have trained every single day, and like maybe so twice a day as well. So I'd go to the gym before college and then go to the track after college. So I probably was doing, you know, about six days a week, 2 sessions on a few days, maybe 9 sessions. Like 9 to 10 sessions a week is where you kind of would end up. But while I was doing that in college, things didn't really click like perfectly. So I was making Europeans and Worlds, but it was probably only until like after college that I made my first final of a European Championship in 2006. And then kind of from then on, I was always kind of knocking on the door of like I'd make a championship, might make a final, but never really got to that level where I would, you know, win a medal, albeit was training as hard and, you know, for various reasons, either being not good enough to be a medalist, injury, or it taking me a little bit longer to get there. So, it was a serious commitment, I would say, was my priority from when I was, you know, up until the age of 30 was my be all and end all obsession. So, you know, everything else just took a back step. I moved to Germany. Eventually found a setup I could train in Germany, in Leverkusen, which isn't the most glamorous part of Germany if you've ever been there.
I actually have been to Leverkusen, yeah, it's quite industrial.
Yeah. So I actually, you know, I'd been looking to train abroad and couldn't find a setup. And then I was trying to qualify for a World Championship and ended up in Leverkusen at a competition, and just thought the place was phenomenal, like everything you could imagine in terms of a high performance setup. Everything was just like all about high performance. The gym setup, the physio setup, medical setup, you know, it was just, I just thought if I could just train here. So I found a way to train there, and there was a coach who kind of took me under his wing, and then I quit my job in Ireland and moved to Germany.
Wow.
So and then that's kind of when things kind of took off a little bit more. But yeah, I'd been doing okay beforehand, but then I think it was probably 2011 was my best performance in the World Championships in Korea. I came 6th and then 5th because of a few Russian disqualification, and London, and then kind of retired after that.
But because I did read as well in an article that you said when you did retire that your body was broken. And was it physical, or was there mental and emotional that went with that, in terms of that feeling of broken? Potentially is not the right word, but you know that that's enough now, or it's time to stop.
I think they're very interconnected, you know, to be honest. Like if your body is suffering, it's very hard to like mentally keep going. It was mainly physical. Like I by 2011 I did quite well, and you know, then I just thought, like, finally, like, this is, you know, 5th in the world, you know, now I'll get my medals and it'll all go uphill from here. And like, little did I know that was going to be like my best performance ever. But, you know, then I had some injury. Like I was very injury prone throughout my career, and there's reasons for that. Like when you don't train properly, you know, or, you know, do the right things when you're younger, but loads of lessons learned for younger athletes. But I would say, then the kind of injuries started kicking in. London, I was numerous injuries and illnesses that year, and I kind of got to the point where, you know, I just about made it through London, and then the year after I kind of hobbled on and tried to compete. I think I did one competition in 2013. I was getting to the point where I was kind of waking up in the middle of the night to ice my ankle. Like it was taking me an hour before I even started my training session to actually like warm my body up and get rid of the Achilles pain, get rid of the back pain, rehab, prehab.
Yeah.
And I think I didn't believe anymore. I kind of thought to myself, like, I'm never going to jump as high as I used to jump.
Yeah.
So what's the point? I'm just going to be less than I was. And I think once that, like, because that's what was my drive before, is like, I felt like, okay, there's more there that I can, you know. And I think sometimes you get to the top of a mountain and you see the top of another mountain, you're like, so every few centimeters I got better at, I kind of thought, well, like, there's more there, because if I do this and I do that, then I'll get even better. But at this point, I just kind of thought, I'm never going to get better. So, and then training became harder. Living in Germany became harder. And like, you know, I think when you're in a really high performance mindset, things don't feel like a sacrifice.
Yeah.
Like you just do it. It's like, you know, you can't go to your friends' weddings, you can't go home for a funeral, you can't do all these things, you can't go out, you can't, you know, your relationships suffer, you know, like romantic relationships, things that, but you're kind of like, oh, it doesn't really matter, like, you know, because like I have my goal, and it just never feel like a sacrifice. It started to feel heavy, and it started to feel like a sacrifice. So I don't know, I think my body gave up, and I didn't have the belief anymore.
It's really interesting, because as you were talking there's so much in what you're saying, and you mentioned obsession and, you know, high performance and focusing on the goal, and it seems to just sound like laser focused, because you've described so many setbacks and so many, you know, injuries and things throughout your career, yet you persisted. Is that in essence to you the difference between everyday performance and high performance?
Yeah, I think so. I think it is that laser focus. You know, it is, I think, and it depends what you're, you know, not everyone's in that kind of sporting world. You know, it is the kind of, I suppose that's maybe the difference between peak performance and high performance. You know, I try to be high performing in my daily work and my daily life, but it's a different level. It's a different kind of world that you're living in, when it's like high performance sport is probably a microcosm, and there's loads of lessons you can take from it into normal life. But like, yeah, high performance sport is not normal life, really. The kind of lengths and extremes and highs and lows, and it's exhilarating. But at the same time, it's not something forever, I would say, as well, and can be exhausting.
Time bound in some ways.
Yeah. But like, there's loads of lessons you take into your everyday life. And I think those, you know, what you mentioned there around the kind of the setbacks and the kind of picking yourself up and everything, you know, it becomes kind of part of your character. So I do think if I didn't have like that background in sport and learn the lessons there, I think I'd be a different person altogether, you know.
That's something I'm really curious about as well, is the crossover then. So, I mean, high performance sport, as you say, it's exceptional, you know, and because of the level that you're at, in most cases is time bound, you know, it has a beginning.
You can do it for a short period, but not forever.
Because it is that peak. How has that, you said it shaped your character, but what would examples of that be now in your everyday life?
I suppose one of the areas that, you know, and it depends on different people. As I said at the start, like everybody's different. But I suppose some things I like took from my career. Maybe this sounds like a really negative way of approaching things, but I guess I used to always take that perspective when I was competing, like, you know, focus on the process, like whatever happens in the end, you know, just focus on what you can control and what you can do. And, you know, if you get really injured, you know, just focus on your rehab, focus on the controllables. And I think like that focus on how you get there rather than always focusing on the outcome, kind of builds resilience as well. So I think, and I kind of focus, again, this sounds terrible, but I kind of used to always think, right, instead of, I know people say you have a positive outlook, and I do have a positive outlook, but I would often in athletics say, well, okay, what's the worst that can happen? Like, okay, so I don't make this and I don't make that, and I don't make the team, or I go out there and I bomb, and I knock all the bars and I get like an absolute like laughing stock. And then I kind of work back from that and be like how bad is that? It's probably not that bad. What would I do? My parents still love me. My friends still love me. I still tried my best. And I kind of be like, right, well, it's not that bad. So, you know, it helped me try, because, you know, if what's the worst that can happen, and it's not that bad, and here's how I would approach it if the worst did happen. You know, nobody died, you know, it's not like it's at the end of the day, like, it's sport. It's not, you know, so I think sometimes, like, even last week I was speaking at a conference in Singapore, and it was absolutely on an area that totally in my depth, like, you know, how AI is revolutionizing food safety or something like that. And I was like, okay, I'm not actually very equipped in this. And again, I was like, okay, well, what's the worst that can happen? Like, you know, I can talk about something I do know about. I can be asked a few questions that I can't answer. I was like, you know what, the worst thing, I can pretend to faint.
Yeah.
you know, like, so, you know, and it kind of helps you to go, okay, I'm just going to step out of my comfort zone. So I think throughout my career, I was just like, just step out of your comfort zone. And I think that's stood to me in my other life as well, you know, my career, and, you know, the way I kind of approach things is like, you just have the right attitude, give it a go. You know, you'll learn something along the way, even if it doesn't work out, you know, it's better than not doing anything. So, you know, choose action over inaction and try and get stuff done. Yeah,
action over inaction, really important. And when you mentioned earlier on just about the strength training, just going back to the I suppose the lack of knowledge really around strength training and how to supplement what you're doing on, you know, a day-to-day basis to improve your performance for the high jump in the field or track and field. And you said that there was a lot of lessons that you would have for younger athletes now around that. What would some of them be?
Yeah, I'm lucky enough now to work with a couple of great athletes. They're coaches in the UK, but I kind of help them out a bit here in Ireland. And yeah, look, I think, you know, I probably had a propensity to overtrain, so, and overwork and things like that. So, you know, I think less is more sometimes, and quality over quantity is important. I probably learned the hard way in terms of injuries and everything else. You know, I think having that like positive outlook, even when things go wrong, that not everything has to be perfect to be progress, is really important. So, you know, training sessions might not go well, but you've done something, you've progressed, you've learned by even having a bad session, you've learned something. And yeah, I think as well, it's just that focusing on what you're gaining. And like my German coach used to say, like, alles mitnehmen, which is like, you know, take everything with you. So just learn along the journey and, you know, embrace and enjoy it. Like one thing I sometimes like kind of just think is like, God, did I really appreciate it when I was there? Like, did I soak it all up? And like, I hope I did, but like looking back, you often think, God, maybe I could have made more of it and, you know, really embraced it. So you kind of have to enjoy the journey, because you don't know what's going to happen at the end. Like,
yeah. I can relate to that definitely in terms of the being present. At things. And I read a quote recently about enjoy right now, because in 1 or 2 years you'll be thinking back to this moment in time, wishing that you were back there, or wishing you were that age again. And
you were so critical of ourselves as kids as well, and you're like, God, Jesus, if I'd be delighted to look like I did when I was 17. But you know, you're like this paranoid teenager. You know, God.
Yeah, I know.
Old head, young shoulders.
Yeah. And in terms of your role now in Sports Ireland, what does that involve?
So I'm a board member, and I'm on a number of the subcommittees, so the Women in Sport Committee, High Performance Committee and Eligibility, which is great. So yeah, essentially we're responsible for, you know, the executive, obviously we run the operational side. Sport Ireland has a huge remit from high performance to participation to, you know, women in sport. And like, I guess, which is really funny, because when you're in high performance sport, you think that's the world, and then you go into Sport Ireland, you realise how much they do across the board in terms of participation, anti-doping, everything else. So essentially, we set the strategic direction, are responsible for governance and everything else. But the executive, there's a wonderful executive team there, and the board meet every month, and just make approvals, give feedback, and just support the executive and getting the job done.
So what would be the strategic direction of Sports Ireland now at the moment?
So there's a number of pillars, in the current strategy. Women in sport is a really big area, given the topic of our podcast today. Coaching, obviously, be that from pathways up to high performance. Then the other areas.
And is that getting more women involved, or more women involved in coaching, or?
Yeah. Oh, sorry. I meant coaching was in like the other pillar, but actually, the coaching element is a really important part of the women in sport pillar as well. In terms of and even from a volunteer perspective, trying to increase the amount of female volunteers. But even from either be it high performance coaching, right down to just even grassroots coaching as well.
Okay.
And they actually do a lot of work around, just even for how to coach females differently, which is like important as well. And I can speak to that from my own experience as well. And obviously high performance with the Paris coming up, the Olympics as well. And then the ethics side, again, anti-doping and ethics and everything. So it's huge remit. But they're, fabulous organisations, and lucky to be involved in it since 2021, to date. So it's nice to kind of come back into sport a bit, as well, from take a little bit of a break from it for a while, and now kind of get back involved. So
and you can use your first-hand experience then as well to add value and make a difference. And
there's a number. So there's a great diversity on the board in terms of you'd obviously have people with kind of financial background, state agency background, high performance athletics as well. So one of my colleagues, Olive Lochnan, who I would have competed with, she's on the board as well. So there's a good breadth of experience, and I guess even from in Bord Bia, we're a state agency as well, so it's interesting to see it's different head departments, but both state agencies from a governance perspective.
And what is, when you mentioned there the female, like the difference in terms of female coaching, like what if I was an athlete now or a coach, and you were to explain to me the variance between coaching males and coaching females, what would kind of the top 3 variances be, would you say?
Yeah, even when you think of just being comfortable having conversations around more of the challenges that a female athlete will have around the time of the month. Do you have your period? Having a period, cramps, and all those kind of things that are important, and to be able to kind of different ways of communicating. Even from, is
that more language based then as well, in terms of different ways of communicating, or?
Yeah, it could be a language based. It could be just even an awareness. I suppose even just awareness and understanding, sensitive areas. I would have had, serious challenges with different coaches over the years around even just, discussing weight, puberty, those kind of topic areas, I suppose are really sensitive as well. And I think there are at the end of the day, it's all it is sport and high performance, but we are different in many ways. And there's different challenges as well. So it's, I suppose, trying to develop approaches to address some of those, and even just across the board, we've seen huge increase in women in sport, from more media coverage in sport. We've seen there are more coaches involved in sport as well, and from a volunteer perspective, but there's a long way to go, still, in terms of women in sport, and that's why I guess it's a kind of key part of the strategy. But it's been a sea change since I was in athletics anyway. So
and it's amazing even when you say about the time of the month or puberty or changes like that they're things that weren't spoken about that much anyway in the past, unless you got somebody who was a little bit attuned to it. So it's great that it's
or even just
more in that direction in terms of openness.
The gear you wear and options
around it,
and things like that. And so things we might not have even thought about. And I think while I was quite outspoken as a young athlete, I think now you kind of as I said, every athlete's different. So, you know, making sure that even some athletes might not feel comfortable talking about things. So how do you like kind of find a way around that and make sure things are comfortable, or there's other people there's other mentors or other people on the team that like athletes can talk to. It doesn't necessarily have to be the coach.
Yeah, because I think, you know, if the environment is created, then it allows for people that are less outspoken then to get the same benefits from it. And do you feel like there's more studies being done then specifically on females in sports? Because predominantly in history, the vast majority of research across so many topics is based on a white Caucasian male of a certain height and a certain weight. And that is the starting point. I'm not saying that's right or wrong, but that's the fact.
Yeah, and then you don't have the historical data to compare to as well. Yeah. So no, there is.
Do you see a step change in the more analysis around data around females?
Yeah.
Is that something that you can see an improvement in?
Yeah, absolutely. There is a big improvement in it. And I know there's a guy in one of our high performance committees who's Orico have done a quite extensive research in that area recently, and you know the impact on performance and things, but just across the board. Yeah, I think the investment in research is going for more and more into that. So yeah, lot done, more to do.
Yeah.
Lot more to do.
And then from a career perspective, obviously CSR, sustainability, is massive now. I think a few years ago, many large organisations were looking at it for the first time. Some people have done a really good job. Greenwashing is a thing. Some people have a lot of integrity behind what plans are in place. What is the standpoint now, do you think? Like, where are we with corporate social responsibility and sustainability, do you think, now, from a corporate perspective?
From a corporate perspective, I think a lot has been done, but like, God, the challenges are so immense and the need for action is so huge. Like, given the trajectory we are on, like we're the hottest year on the planet. In terms of plastic pollution, circular economy, miles behind, and obviously a lot of topics we're talking about today. You know, gender pay gap is still a huge issue in Ireland and across the world. So there is a growing awareness, I would say, around corporates, and you know, in Ireland, some like corporates doing really well in terms of their progress to it. But I guess the scale of the climate crisis is so huge that we need more action from everybody. So that's a lot of the work we're doing. And the Origin Green programme is supporting companies to, I suppose, understand the challenge, measure the impacts, develop plans to implement the change, but there's from a policy perspective huge challenges as well in terms of meeting our climate action plan targets. But you know, you're trying to be optimistic. There is solutions as well. And you know, what was the stat I was reading yesterday? Was around even food waste. Like, if we even decreased our food waste in UK and US by 25%, you could solve world hunger. So, you know, there's a broken system in many regards in terms of how much food we're wasting and the poverty that is out there in the world. So, you know, I think technology will support in terms of, you know, carbon capture in future and areas like that, carbon sequestration. But, you know, we're really at like an inflection point now where if there isn't action on all fronts, you know, there'll be certain tipping points that, you know, we won't be able to go back on. And like everything, it's always the, I suppose, the most vulnerable that are affected. So in terms of migration and displacement, like there's going to be huge challenges. Those countries, the kind of third world countries that maybe haven't benefited from economic progress, you know, the Western world is, and you know, the likes of China, US and Europe are creating a lot of the challenges through industrial revolution and everything else. And, you know, the small island states are the ones that will suffer from a lot of the floodings. Or, you know, agriculture will become a challenge. So it's the challenge of our generation, I think. It's nice to be. It's like I love being in that space and that area. I do like having kind of a outlet from a sporting world to, you know, because there's so many challenges in sustainability. I try to be positive. Like, you know, there are solutions too. So, you know, we can get there if people make the effort, and governments, and, you know, there's a concerted effort across the board. And as consumers, you know, in our daily choices, there's a lot we can do as well. And while it might not feel like, you know, that makes a huge difference, if everybody makes the small changes, it can change, and it changes the culture as well. But yeah, it's nice to have a few different outlets in your life, otherwise you're
definitely. I mean, there is a crossover between what you described in terms of sports and high performance, and that kind of personal sustainability and renewing yourself in some ways to be able to, you know, sustain yourself healthily into the future. Like CSR is so broad. It covers so much. Sustainability covers so much. And I think both in the corporate world and outside the corporate world, it can be really hard for people to get to grips with what that means, and to really think that if you're putting X in this bin rather than that bin, that you're making a difference. So what, if you were to break it down into, you know, I suppose, simpler building blocks, what would be the kind of 3 things from a personal perspective that somebody could do to be more sustainable, or feel like they're contributing to the overall picture?
Yeah, I mean, and, you know, depending on the work you do or the lifestyle you lead, you know, I mean, in your workplace, you know, developing green teams, looking at the environmental impact, or where you're sourcing your energy, you know, how, as you said, how you're segregating bins.
So so the green team would look at these things.
Like, and that's, I suppose, what we do. Let's say in the Origin Green program, we would ask companies to develop targets around sustainability areas. And I think even sustainability can be quite challenging for people to understand. And like when we talk about sustainability, we're talking about like environmental and social elements, you know. So it's how you treat your employees, as well as, you know, the environment as well. So you know, it is kind of wide ranging, but we would ask companies to set targets, measure where they are on the journey, and then set smart targets around achieving impact. So companies would measure their emissions, their energy, how much waste they're using, and then, you know, they'd also look at social sustainability initiatives, like how they're supporting a workforce, gender pay gap, diversity and inclusion.
How would you, again, to I suppose, explain it in more detail in terms of the social and the workforce and treating people better? Like, what does that look like? So if we had a listener now that was part of a workforce or a leader in an organisation, how do they measure where they are? Yeah,
and some I suppose some target areas might be more, you know, smart target area. They might be more measurable. One of the areas that we're really encouraging companies to look at in the program is their diversity and inclusion. So, you know, you measuring your gender pay gap is a really good starting point. I suppose the action plan that comes out of that is, you know, looking at what kind of mentoring opportunities you have, ensuring that every interview panel is made up of interviewers, are made up of, you know, both male and female. That, you know, you're anytime you're having an event in work, that you've an equal number of male and female people presenting, you know, so the role models are there. And, you know, so some of the areas might be like more like, you know, okay, our gender pay gap is 14% and we need to get it down to 7%. But, you know, it's the initiatives that build that can make the change, you know. And what's leadership courses for, you know, promoting leadership courses for women in the workplace as well. That would be just, I suppose, one example in that kind of diversity and inclusion space. Yeah.
Like, is there an example that comes to mind of someone that you've seen, and you don't need to name names, but like an initiative that's worked really well and made a really big impact in that space?
Do you know, there is the 30% Club in Ireland. It's actually, I think, in the sustainability space or corporate social responsibility, whatever language you want to use, but, you know, there are a lot of collaborations, and I think that kind of works well in terms of networking, knowledge sharing. And the 30% Club is like offering scholarships for women in leadership.
Okay.
And they've and they're hosting a lot of events and knowledge sharing around initiatives that they've implemented. You're probably really interested in it. And then particularly for our sector, the food sector, they've got an ag diff group that it kind of is a subset of like I think a lot of them are on the 30% Club as well. So it should be the 50% Club now, but I think the brand is I think the brand has gotten so well known. So yeah, there's a lot of kind of, I think knowledge exchange is important, but that's in the diversity and inclusion space. But we do it a lot with our companies around sustainability and climate, because some of the areas, there's a lot of legislation coming down the line as well from a corporate perspective that people need to challenge. But then, like, look, in your personal life, it can be the simple things like taking the bike instead of driving the car, carpooling, making sure that you're asking your energy provider to, like, that you want to source green electricity if you have the opportunity to retrofit your home. And I think even just shopping, smart shopping as well. Like, do you need the additional clothes? Do you, thinking twice about what you buy, where you buy it, and even planning your food shop so you're not going to have food waste, composting. They're the kind of things we always
on a day-to-day.
Just kind of trying to lead a conscious life, I suppose, can make a difference.
And just going back to the 30% Club versus the 50%, and the shifting view, I suppose, of women having really successful careers and also being mothers and managing at home. Like, what do you feel from a personal sustainability perspective as females is realistic? Yeah, and this is such a, and I don't have kids, and I'm just in awe of many of my colleagues who I can't seem to get myself out the door in one piece. I'm like, how they manage to get kids to crash and everything else, and lunch is packed, and it can be challenging. I was actually reading research from I think her name is Claudia Golden. She's a Nobel Prize, one of the more recent Nobel Prize winners, and she did a huge amount of study on gender pay gap. And like none of it's groundbreaking. It's all stuff we know, but like when you have the data and the evidence, and women are on average more educated, have better education. I don't know, that must be a global stat, but there's still a huge gender pay gap. And I think really what it comes down to is after childbirth is what she found out. It's like that's when the big change happens. And everybody loses. Men get to spend less time with their family, and women get to spend, have to end up sacrificing some of their career. So, I think any policies that can kind of equal, I think a lot of the flexible working has made a huge difference. In Bord Bia, I know that from colleagues. I know Lidl, where we worked together before. There's been a lot of change there as well. And I do think those flexible work policies make a difference. But a lot of the research that Golden found was it's the invisible work. It's the it's the who takes care of the additional in at home. The additional caring, the additional workload, and it becomes a challenge. So it's, I suppose, at home and in work, you need to kind of that playing field needs to be equal. So thankfully my partner is a feminist. So and it is so important, because it's so important for kids as well to have the role models growing up, and that sense that you should have to sacrifice your career is not equitable, really, and it's not good for the business. We know more diverse and inclusive workplaces are, perform better. So it's kind of on us all to make those changes and have male champions as well and allies. 100%. In business. 100%. And at the times, you've lived in different countries, you've international business experience, you've pivoted your career on many occasions. What has drove you to pivot? What's going on for you at that time when you've decided to change area, upskill, move company? What kind of happens for you in that moment, do you think, to allow you to have had such a fruitful and rich career to date?
Good perspective. It's a really good kind of question. I think, I don't know. I think like I was really clear when I, finished my athletics career that like I need to be passionate about what I do and care about it, because I think that drives high performance. It's hard to be driven when you don't really believe in what you're doing. So I think finding your why, finding, your passion and areas you're motivated, and be that just being motivated by your teams and everything else is incredibly important. So I think that's why when I retired from athletics, I went back to study. I went back to Smurfit Business School to do corporate sustainability, because it was an area, I suppose, I was already, like, had piqued my interest. I'd already done a bit of work with the United Nations kind of think tank in Germany. And I felt like that's something I can, really give my energy to. And then I suppose I think I'm motivated by challenge. So I loved going into Lidl when there wasn't really a corporate sustainability function, and being able to grow and build something, strong and new. And while there's a long, big journey, and the team that are currently there now are doing a phenomenal job, I did like going in at the earlier stages, so that really motivated me at the time. I think my move then to Bord Bia, the opportunity because it's the whole of industry. I felt like there's a real opportunity to make change, and even if we make some small shifts, like it's the whole sector, and we can make a bigger difference. And I think the opportunity to have, I love managing teams. I'm so fortunate in Bord Bia. It's a wonderful place to work, as was Lidl, and many of the other places I've worked. But I had the opportunity to have a bigger team, and a kind of a bigger scope in what I was doing. And learn more. I think so. I'm kind of motivated by challenge and by the opportunity to learn and work with people, and learn from people. And
I mean, in terms of leadership, what type of leader would you describe yourself as?
Oh, I don't know. I think we did ask this question to my team before when we were doing a team day. I think I'm quite a collaborative leader, so I don't know if that's even a type of leader.
It is.
I don't know. I'm sure there's all these buzzwords that I'm supposed to know, but I guess I do try to give direction, and make sure that everyone knows I'm always there and I can shoulder the storm, but give people the chance and opportunity to be their best, show their best, and give credit for what they're doing, because there's some just phenomenal people on my team that have just such deep expertise in their areas that I'm not the expert. So I kind of see my role as just being able to get things out of the way and create a supportive environment for people to be their best, rather than know everything, because I definitely don't.
It sounds like you're describing yourself being like the environment creator, creating that space for people to do their jobs, and being able to collaborate and coach them to be the best version of themselves.
Hopefully I'll aspire to that anyway.
Definitely. And is there any common themes you've seen as a leader when you're coaching females or individuals in general, in terms of people holding themselves back from fulfilling their own potential?
Look, there's that always that that sense that, and it's well proven in research, that maybe it's the innate perfectionist in women. I don't know, but a tendency to kind of maybe hold back if you don't have all the information or knowledge. But hopefully that is changing. It's like asking and and demanding a bit more. I guess that's certainly something that we've that's, as I said, well proven in research, that women will not go for the job if they're not fully qualified, or maybe hold back in terms of certain areas if they don't have all the knowledge. So look, I think that's important. That's part of the mentoring process and everything else. And I suppose, look, I think pushing for policy is important. So, you know, sometimes maybe like as an individual, you don't want to say, well, like have a special case for a certain situation in your work that you need flexibility on. So, you know, it's really up to organizations to create that policy environment and, you know, way of working that like no one person has to say, well, actually, I need this flexibility because of this, because people that maybe don't want to ask for the special case.
Yeah, definitely. I think pushing for policies is really good advice. How would you do that?
Yeah, look, and I think that's like, as I said, green teams in work, but you know, through like there's a lot like in our organisation we have a diversity and inclusion group, and I think establishing those groups, be it within the kind of overall CSR framework or driven by HR, to just kind of look through and see what kind of policy areas, and you know, even starting with interview processes, recruitment processes, like even scanning the language and how job advertisements are written and where you look for people, and so through those groups, because then it's easier. It's easier to say, okay, like, you know what, we should have like, you know, we should have a policy on, you know, fertility treatment or menopause or miscarriage, you know, but no one person wants to say, oh, do you know what, like I just had a miscarriage and I need a day off work. You know, like, because it's personal. You know,
create that safe environment that people can speak up. And so in the name of progress as opposed to problem.
And then saying, like, you know, it's just like this, if this were available, or, you know, paternity, like the big thing as well is like the availability of paternity leave is one of the biggest things. So if more men were taking the time off, it would make a huge difference. So instead of it being 2 weeks, if men were all of a sudden taking 4 months off when baby's born, that helps everybody, you know. So it might not be necessarily, so it's, I think, taking a step back as well and looking at all those different areas. And thankfully, look, I think things have come on, but yeah, as I keep saying in this podcast, a lot done, more to do.
Exactly, and I think the split parental leave when a child is born is probably going to be one of the biggest impacts on all of the things that you've highlighted there in terms of gender pay gap and career development and policy improvement. And we're still a long way off that.
And the unconscious bias, you know.
Exactly.
You know, when someone's hiring her, they're thinking, oh God, she like a, you know, like we were given advice when we were younger, you know, if you've got a ring, you know, take your wedding ring off if you're going into like, you know, like into an interview, like that's just terrible stuff to think that like there might, you know. So look, I think there can be unconscious bias, and we all have biases.
Like, I mean, I remember myself, I couldn't put a number on it, but I would say as recent as 10 years ago, those exact conversations about, you know, people coming in for interviews thinking, oh, you know, well, potentially they got married then, and, you know, then there'll be maternity leave, and, you know, it's just crazy to think.
And I'm all for maternity leave, but we're very busy. And it's like, oh, come on.
Exactly. So it's just how do we
if everyone said that.
You
know, what would the world do?
Exactly. And there are countries, and I won't name them because I'll probably name them incorrectly, but there are definitely pockets of the world where the population is going backwards due to women not having children because they feel, well, I'm going to have to take a step back. So it's a real issue worldwide for more reasons than just gender equality. It's for economic growth and other things. So it can potentially mushroom into something way bigger if we don't put the solutions in place now. Yeah,
and I know another big challenge and things that companies need to address is, you know, women coming back after maternity leave. It can be a hugely stressful time from what I hear from my friends, and just how, you know, getting back into the workforce and, you know, what's changed, and, you know, women paranoid, God, was my maternity cover better than me? And, you know, all these kind of things. You're like, God, you know, just as a lady, you just need to try and, like, you know, be aware and, you know, think that, like, this might be a challenging time. How can we support it, you know? And as you say, it's good for everybody. It's good for the company. It's good for everyone on the teams, and, you know,
and you get so much more back from the employee as well. You know. I wanted to just quickly touch on public speaking, because I know you do a good bit of public speaking in and your
just don't listen to it afterwards is my strategy.
What advice would you give to someone who isn't a fan of public speaking, which is probably a lot of humans in the world. What advice would you give to them if they had to go in and do a keynote speech or even a small presentation for a group of people?
I would say practice under pressure. So, like preparation is the biggest stress avoidance strategy I have, and unfortunately I get myself involved in too many things and never come prepared enough to most things, today included. But I think, if you're really feeling, like this is pushed, you're going to be out of your comfort zone in a certain situation. I think, replicating that situation. And you asked earlier about things I learned from sport, that's another one is, you get comfortable in the environment. I'd always go down to the track or stage or whatever it is where you're going to be performing and and do it in front of a team, do it in front of a critical team. And the more, and you might feel like, well, I don't want to be too rehearsed because it might come across, but like the more you practice, the more natural it becomes. And then, just keep practicing, record yourself, listen back, and practice under pressure. Yeah,
it's good advice. And you've talked about so much today, but I suppose just to distill things a little bit, what 3 key pieces of advice would you give to our listeners from your own life lessons and experience?
3. Well, I think I definitely think the first thing is, if we're talking about performing at another level and like being your best self, I think finding something you're passionate about, is a great starting point. I think, progress is better than perfection. So don't let maybe not knowing everything and, your own fears, try and overcome them to kind of, push out of your comfort zone. Because I think if you take that process perspective of I'll learn something along the way, I think is really important. I think people want to help. And we can be reluctant to ask for help, but there's networks out there. Ask advice, ask for help, and equally, be on the other side of that. I think be supportive of other people and give back. So if you have the opportunity to share your knowledge, share your perspective, and that'll come back. So I think those kind of having that growth mindset all the time will help.
Yeah. And do you have any book recommendations, like a book that has stuck with you that you've read, or anything that you're reading at the moment that you could recommend to our listeners?
A recent book, Legacy.
Okay.
By Care. It's essentially a book about, it's like 15 lessons in leadership, but he immersed himself in with the All Blacks.
Okay.
So there's some really good learnings in that book, I think, and really simplified learnings. And to your point as well around like the kind of learnings that you probably get from sport, but kind of bring into daily life and leadership. So
the book is called Legacy, and who's it by?
Care.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, great. And the final question is, what other high performance women should I be speaking to on the podcast, and why?
I can definitely give you a few names afterwards, for sure. I think it's always interesting to hear from people from different walks of life. I think I'm always inspired by people like, even in the charity sector, social care, and, people from that kind of diverse backgrounds who've changed careers or working in a variety of sectors, I think is always interesting. And I'd like to hear, I suppose, from the new Ireland as well, like, from people who've come to Ireland and are establishing themselves here. It's always interesting to kind of see the international perspective on how things work in other countries as well, and definitely what their experience of Ireland is.
And does anybody spring to mind?
There's a few athletes maybe, that I can think of. As I said earlier, some of my mentors probably would be good people to talk to. Okay. So I can certainly maybe connect.
That would be great. Grow the network.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
It's been an absolute pleasure talking to you today, Dee. Thanks for coming in.
No problem.
I really enjoyed having you as a guest on High Performance Woman podcast, and I wish you all the best.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
I really hope you enjoyed today's episode. You can join the High Performance Woman tribe by subscribing, liking and sharing podcasts with your friends and family. and by following me at High Performance Woman on Instagram and TikTok. I'll see you next time.